Hey, this is Anthony. I was just doing a quick little intro to this one. This is an After Dark series. We recorded this early on, and just to have a backup because we are going to be attending Raven Fest in Sanford, North Carolina, a charity event at Raven Forge Games. And also another announcement before we start out, I wanted to put a reminder out there that UberCubeathon 2025 tickets are available. I will include them in the show notes. That'll be April the 26th in Chapel Hill, North Carolina at the Gathering Place. Reach out to me if you have any questions on all of the socials. And other than that, I hope you enjoy the show. And if you hear any cards that we talk about during this, UberCube is a TCG Player affiliate. So feel free to click on that link, purchase those cards if you want to support the show with limited effort. Other than that, have fun, and thank you so much for listening. Anthony out. Welcome to UberCube, the podcast we discuss all things Cube, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, a.k.a. Uber Bear, and today we are going a little double here. We're back to back.
It's 2025. It's early in the year.
What do we do here, people?
We're I don't want to say nursing a hangover, but we're back in the game, right? So we've had our little time off for Christmas and New Year, and now we're getting back into the swing of recording. So this is actually being recorded immediately after the episode, our first episode that we're going to release for 2025. So we finished all that, and then we started getting into discussing plans for this coming year, right? So again, we've gone through a lot of topics throughout the whole history of the podcast. We've done the meta conversations, we've done Cube-specific conversations. This one is going to be a little outside of that, right? So I think this actually was catalyzed by us talking about UberCubeathon 2025, which we plan to do. 2024 was a great success, 2025. So now we want to start talking a little bit more about what we can do to accelerate Cube's popularity throughout the whole sphere of Magic. It's well established that Commander has become kind of the de facto most popular format. The emotional attachment, people love building and playing their Commander decks. We want to utilize what has made Commander so popular and build some content that will allow us to explain why Cube is so amazing.
Kind of preface this with May kind of started this conversation out with is I have an LGS next to me. They said that I could bring my cube and I could actually do that on an evening, but now I have to kind of get off my laurels, pardon me, May, and move forward and actually take the cube down there and start cube nights consistently. May, what do you have to say about this?
So, for context, I've had conversations with this LGS a couple times, and the owner of it has mentioned he's even willing to provide price support for this, for the amount of interest that he has in being able to run this. Okay, it is not a matter of there is some obstacle preventing me from doing so. It is just a matter of me not being a coward about it and actually making the call to schedule it and actually plan those times so that way I can plan on being there on these specific days to be like, all right, today is Cube Day. I'm going to bring my cube down there. I'm going to try to advertise it. I'm going to try to get people interested and excited about playing Cube on that upcoming day. Right? And that's the kind of the part where I feel like I and a lot of other people get stuck.
So let's talk about the drinks we're having before we proceed here. So Stu has provided me with a Noda Little Slurp. How about yourself, May? Because Stu's doubled down.
I'm just having a quirk.
Okay, here we go.
Well, right. Hang on. Let's clarify here.
Proper,
it's not little slur.
Going proper.
Okay.
Little.
It's lil slur.
Little
slur.
Little.
Something.
Yeah, I'm cracking.
Little.
All right.
So, I want to also make a statement that follows on directly, May, from what you said, right? The getting off your rear end and going down and making, taking your cube down and getting people to come and hang out and play cube. That all sounds very simple, but the buy-in and the commitment that requires from more people than it takes to convince a couple of guys to go and play a game of Commander, right? You want to say, a couple of people, let's go down and play Commander. You go down to a local game store, 9 times out of 10, there's probably going to be another person or two down there that wants to play a game of Commander, right? That's a given, I would say, at this point, given the popularity of the format. But you're now talking about taking a cube down. I'm going to go on with the idea that this is an 8-player cube. Right, let's move forward with that being the benchmark. You need 8 players for your cube, or ideally you want 8 players for your cube. So that's 2 full pods worth of Commander players that you want to be able to get together and play this cube. So I think I've mentioned this before on other episodes. The reason why this is going to be difficult to get off the ground, even just a little bit, is you're asking people to sway away from playing a deck that they have an emotional attachment to. A lot of players will take their backpack, just like we used to when we were hanging out together to play Commander. I would take my little bag, and it's got a bunch of deck boxes in it, and I don't know how many Commander decks I own right now, 10, 12, something like that. I had some level of emotional attachment to all of them, some more than others, but definitely some emotional attachment to them. And I am going to a store where potentially people could have, even if you're going down there off the cuff, right? I'm just going to show it with my cube and say, hey, does anyone want to play my cube? You're asking players to separate themselves from a game-playing experience that they have an emotional attachment to in the form of their Commander decks and play something that A, they have no emotional attachment to, and B, they have no idea about anything, right? They don't know what it's about. Maybe if you said, hey, I've got a vintage cube, you want to play my vintage cube, okay, if they're, somewhat familiar with Magic content on YouTube or Twitch and they see enough of that, okay, that might be an easier sell. If you're trying to take your Fey cube, Anthony, your Horror cube, or your Fem cube, or a lot of these other cubes, they're going to have no idea about it unless they're a avid listener to our podcast or have consumed a lot of content about cube. Then they're just going to be completely unfamiliar with it. So now you are presenting yourself a huge challenge to be able to convince someone, not just from a gameplay experience level, but also on an emotional level, that you want to not just give them something to entertain themselves with on a Friday night or a Saturday night. But now you're looking to expand that emotional attachment that they have to Magic to something that doesn't belong to them. And that is difficult, but I think this is the key to really exploding Cube in your local scene.
So, May, you're going to present this. What is the pitch? How do you get them to come on board?
Expecting me to have a pitch off of hand after...
Multiple
coming right off of Stu's entire tirade is definitely a choice.
Yes. This is like reading the really long Magic card. Let's go.
So we've already had our episode talking about our kind of elevator pitch, right? This is something we've already talked about. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily a matter of, here is my 30-second presentation on why you should play my Fey Cube, as much as, how am I going to present this in a way that will entice people who aren't part of my friend group, who are just kind of players in the casual scene at an LGS or whatever, to be enticed to come at least try this as an event? And that is, I feel like, more important of an obstacle than just, hey, here's why you should play my specific cube, but rather, here is why you should at least try a cube. Because it doesn't matter what cube's in that slot. It could be kind of like adjacent to what Stu said, where it doesn't matter if you choose like the vintage cube, which is more recognizable, more well-known, etc. At the end of the day, you are still trying to rope people into playing this new format with cards that they have no attachment to, and that is fundamentally what the disconnect is going to be. So a large part of what our goals for the year should be, as both content creators and as cube curators, is that we should find ways to kind of build our cube scene locally. And I feel like that the best way that I can do that, outside of just, not being lazy about it, is actually deciding on a plan. Like, write out, how am I going to take... Because our preemptive step of, all right, have a functional cube. Great. My cube's functional. It shows up in CubeCon. It does its thing. Like, it is well known. And for a majority of other people, that's not going to be the case. They can just clone a cube that's well known and well done, whatnot. They can make their own. There is a lot of options. However, just because in our cube community, my cube is well known and whatever, that doesn't transfer to generic Magic players, right? That is not really a sphere. So how do we expand kind of what the perception of cube is beyond, frankly, the stereotype that is well deserved for cubers that, hey, have you heard of the format cube? You should try it sometime. It's definitely way better than Commander. And showing up in Commander events trying to shove people to play the cube, right? Because then people aren't going to want to do it.
They feel evangelized. So one of the things that actually matters is the step one. I kind of said get off your laurels type thing, right? So step one is show up. But then you have to have consistency. People need to know that there is a date dedicated to this idea, like Tuesdays. Tuesday night is the fake cube. Or whatever, right? Or bring your own. And you have some kind of calendarized idea where, because I see this at the Gathering Place and Lucky Paper Radio talked about that. If you want to build a cube community, people have to feel like they have an opportunity to showcase what they've developed as well, too. So you need to have some kind of like consistent means of communicating to the team.
So I think we need to rewind it a bit. Our first step is have a cube, obviously.
Well,
have a cube that's fun to play that people are actually, interested in. Of just saying, here's my pile of cards, let's try to hope for the best.
You won't know
that doesn't excite
until,
people.
Right? Like, you don't know if they like it until. I mean, that's kind of even jumping ahead a little bit, right? You have to try it.
My point is that step one is that you actually have a list, okay?
Okay, there we go. Yeah,
you're confident with your list. You're confident enough that people are willing to try it, okay? Step two is reaching out to either an LGS or some place that you can host or host it at your house. I do not want to host strangers at my house. That is just not something I'm interested in doing. So it was much easier for me to have conversations with my LGS because I just have that kind of relationship with the guy, right? Where we're able to just talk about whatever, and it comes up on occasion where he's like, yeah, I want to run more events. And I'm like, well, I do have the fake cube that I could try to run here. And he's like, yeah, if you want to run it here, then we can call, we can schedule it. I'll even offer prize support, whatnot, which is the first step, right? That is the first step to establishing what you need in order to build that community.
Well,
a place to do so.
I think you're establishing a regular cube night. This is what you're talking about, right? So now you're saying, not only do I just want to introduce players to cube, I want to establish on a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night or whatever the case may be, I am going to commit to showing up to a store with my cube or cubes and saying, we're going to do this, we're going to advertise it, we're going to make an incentive for players in the form of prizes to play my cube. So, here's the reasons why you should come. Hopefully you understand that cube is awesome and I want you to come and play my cube. Right? Is that established? All right. So I'm going to offer an alternative. Here's my pitch. All right. You ready?
Yeah, hit me with it.
So I'm going to go to the local game store and I'm going to take my cube, which I don't have. So I'm going to steal one of Anthony's. I'm going to steal Anthony's artifact cube. I'm going to pick that one.
Uber Bears?
I'm going to steal Uber Bear's artifact cube, and I'm going to go down, and I'm going to expect that there's some groups of guys down there that are playing Commanders, and I'm going to say, hey guys, I see you're playing the Magics, playing the Commanders. What kind of decks you guys playing? And I'm going to target. I'm going to be very strategic about this. I'm going to look for the players that look sweaty, right? The tryhards.
Amway.
The tryhards.
This is Amway?
It is.
Tupperware,
absolutely. You're
Mary
100%
Kay?
correct. I'm going to look for the players that play like I do when I'm really tryharding, right? And I'm going to see, like, oh man, what kind of deck you play? And I'm looking for the high power players, right? Please take this to be a little bit tongue in cheek, but there's some truth to this. I'll say, man, these are some high powered decks that you guys are playing. Are you guys good Magic players? And I'm hoping that their response is going to be, yeah, we're pretty good Magic players. I'm going to be like, I don't know if you guys are good Magic players. Would you like to prove yourselves in the pantheon of Magic to really show yourselves and your friends and me how good a Magic player you are, because I'm not completely convinced. Like, you think you can show up with your partner commanders and expect to convince me that you're a good Magic player?
Showing up, cube in hand, fighting words.
No. All right. You guys want to prove that you're good Magic players. You're going to come over here to this table and you're going to draft a cube. And it is a incredibly technical cube. You're not just going to be able to show up here with your aggro deck. No. Ain't no time for that here. You're going to show up and you're going to prove to me that you are a good enough Magic player to hang with the people that really know how to play Magic.
So
Folks,
all
them
the
being
tongue-in-cheek
challenged.
aside, I think Cube is the great equalizer. It is the ground zero. It removes rule zero from Commander.
Well, what am I doing?
And that's
with that?
oftentimes my pitch.
What am I doing with that? Right, I'm appealing
You're
to
sizing up. You're sizing up your masses.
I'm appealing to the ego, right? Because I feel like, look, I like to play Magic, and you know what? Anyone that knows me will tell you that I have a big ego, right, about a lot of things in life. I have a small ego about a lot of things in life as well. But one thing I will say is that if I'm sitting down to play a commander deck that I really know how to play well, I will expect to play that optimally, right? I will also, when we first started playing Cube as our basically de facto format, and we just separated ourselves from Commander, the fact that I had felt like I had played Commander at a high-ish level, right? We're trying to win in the first couple of turns, combined with the fact that I'd consumed a lot of content, meant that I'd started to get probably an undeserved, right, level of ego about my ability to play Magic, which is probably not very good, but it doesn't matter. I just need to convince myself that I can play Magic at a high level for that to be, important in my decision-making. But so now someone comes to me in the store and they're like, "You're not a good Magic player. You're a garbage Magic player. If you want to prove yourself, come play this cube. You better believe. You want to throw down that gauntlet to me? Let's go. Get the decks out, or get the packs made. We're drafting, and I'm proving myself."
All right. So Stu has went on another tirade. May, what do you got?
So, aside from placating ego or coaxing with Honey being like, "Oh, just try this fun experience with all these fun little incentives and prize incentives and whatnot. Please try my cube. I'm desperate." So aside from those tirades, I think that there is a root conversation that we initially started off with before these tirades, which was, how do we convince Magic players to try cube? Right? And why is it an obstacle whenever we're trying to look for people to play Magic with but I could just play Commander? Right? And I think that the best way that I can explain it is that it is the difference between playing Smash and playing Minecraft, okay? Right? Where when somebody's building their commander deck, whatnot, it is the equivalent of them logging into the server, this Minecraft server, and building up whatever their resources were. They put so much time, effort, whatnot into their buildings, their equipment, whatnot. And if you want to be like, "Okay, great, but come play this other server," they'll be like, "Yeah, right, but all of my stuff's already over here," right? This is still similar comparison, apples to apples, right? As soon as we bring it over to Smash, you don't own those characters, right? There is no customization with those characters. There's no secret things that you can alter within these characters to add customization, whatnot. They are just a sort of hand-picked way to play. But the way that you can play them is, how do I put it? Diverse and interesting, because it's working around the restrictions of those characters. Playing a cube is like playing Smash in that way, because when you sit down to play a cube, you are essentially saying, okay, there are a bunch of available archetypes in here, right? I'm going to sit down and I'm going to try to draft into this particular archetype because it's open, right? And it is not a matter of whether or not you have an attachment to, say, in Minecraft, the whole house that I've spent so much time in, that I built and whatnot, like on a commander deck, as opposed to somebody sitting you down and being like, "Here's a bunch of characters. You can choose any of these characters to play," right? And it's not a matter of trying to make them have some sort of overarching emotional attachment in the same way that they will have their commander deck. We are never going to convince them in the same way that we can with commander decks.
Agreed.
That's just not going to work.
No, it's not.
However, presenting it in a way that it's like, hey, this cube has these different types of archetypes. You like playing these types of archetypes. Let's see if you enjoy building that in this environment. And it's easier for somebody to kind of create their main with that archetype, if you will.
Yes.
Like somebody who's a dedicated aristocrats player, right? Where they understand what the technicalities are in order for a deck to function within the means of being an aristocrats deck or a flicker deck or whatnot. You are essentially sitting down and creating a roster of these characters similar to how Smash is, right? And yes, I promise that this weird comparison makes sense.
Smash by
It is
any
essentially
chance,
building
man?
a roster, sitting down with a bunch of players and saying, all right, pick your character, right?
I agree, and I think you're appealing to the emotional side, the emotional connection that people have with Magic in a different way than they do to Commander, right? So,
right.
Not that there's not a process-driven attachment to their Commander decks. In fact, I think there very much is. And I love the fact that you brought up appealing to the archetypes as being why a player would want to play either their Commander deck or an archetype that's within your cube, right? Because if you notice someone playing an aristocrat-style Commander deck, that should be a fairly easy sell, right? Oh, look, cool, man. You're playing an aristocrat's Commander deck. I actually have a cube with a really, really fun aristocrats package. Maybe you would like to come and draft it and see if you can build that and build a good package. Now you're appealing to the emotional connection that they have with that archetype, combined with the ability for them to build a good deck on the fly. And that's a different kind of emotional connection to the process than it is to just, I could spend all this time, gold fishing and scouring through Scryfall and TCG Player to build this deck and then put it together and play with a play group than it is when you're trying to do something on the fly. And I think that is really the nail right there, is it's a different kind of emotional attachment. It's almost like an emotional attachment that you are trying to appeal to either why they play Magic at all, or just to Magic in general, because I like to play Magic for a variety of reasons. For the most part, it's the social aspect, which I think Cube is wonderful for that, because now you're playing with 8 players in a 1v1 environment rather than just 4. So now I've got double the number of people that I'm hanging out with. But also, it's testing me in a different way, right? It's testing my critical thinking. It's testing my deck building. It's doing a lot more than just allowing me to have all the time in the world to sit down with Scryfall, with TCG Player, with whatever, to build that deck and to have an emotional attachment to those 100 cards that's sitting in that deck box, right? So now I'm not sort of treating this as an emotional attachment to the individual cards, to the game pieces themselves. Now I'm appealing to the emotional attachment of what do you feel your skill level is? What is your emotional attachment to Magic as a, and I don't want to call it as a game, as a product, as a game world building product in general, because I don't want you to just say, hey, I'm just going to sit down with this 100 card deck and play against other people and do what I kind of understand and know that my deck does because that's how I've designed it. I want to sit down with you and say, no, I want you to be creative with Magic on the fly. I want you to build a deck right here just with whatever is passed to you, to be creative, to be thoughtful. And sometimes that can be incredibly simple. Everything just gets passed to you. Super easy. You build that green aggro deck. You build that Boros aggro deck. You build that combo deck or control deck or whatever. Sometimes it requires an incredible amount of thought and detail, and every single pick is so unbelievably critical. And that appeals to a different emotional connection that I feel like players will have to Magic.
I think you can actually say, do you want to test yourself?
Yeah.
Do you want to test your Magic skills? I know you're good at this game, but do you want to push the limits of it, right? You want to build something new and innovative that's never happened before. And the permutations and probability that it will ever happen again, well, they're impossible, right? This is going to be unique to you. It's a thumbprint. Would you like to try it out?
Skeptics are going to feel that that's a little, I don't know, egotistical, whatever, because you're sort of acting upon this superiority complex almost, I feel. But for the people that are going to listen to our podcast, and anyone that's emotionally invested in Cube, not even a specific Cube, but Cube in general, are going to tell you that, yes, this is a much different complex environment and complex process because everything is happening on the fly. So now you are being tested in a way when you're drafting and playing a Cube that you're not when you're playing any kind of constructed format, right? Be it modern or vintage or legacy or commander or whatever the case may be. It tests you in ways that maybe nothing else does.
Yeah, and I feel like that draft actually lets you sort of have a top-down dissection, if you will, of how you approach certain archetypes and how you approach your deck building strategies and whatnot when presented with a bunch of options. So it is one thing to say, hey, I started off with like some pretty good picks in this particular package and an archetype that I'm comfortable playing. So I'm going to try to grab the pieces that I can, the pieces that I'm familiar with, the pieces that I feel like can function within this theme in order to make my deck within this environment. Much like, how do I put it? It is hard to convince Commander players to put down their Commander deck because they have a personal attachment to it because they've spent so much time tuning, refining, and whatnot. Cube is a sort of beauty and impermanence. And I feel like that is the part that gets lost in translation when we're trying to communicate why people should be interested in playing Cube. And the reason why is because people want to play the decks that they've built. They want to play the cards that they've collected, that they've accumulated, whatnot, but framing it as a way of, you have collected this knowledge. You collected this game knowledge, this play styles, these ways to play Magic in a way that does transfer from things like 60 card to Commander to Draft. And this is essentially a way that you can show people that that skill is transferable. There's a beauty in this impermanence because you are building into the things that you are familiar with and comfortable with in an unfamiliar environment. Is that you're essentially playing with a bunch of pieces that you might not have seen before, but you're also trying to look for the pieces that you have and the playstyles that you have, right? And there is a sort of beauty in that because in an impermanent environment where you don't keep the deck, you don't refine the deck, there is no part of this equation in which there just keeps getting retested over and over and over again. At best, you take a picture of the deck list, and then when you draft it again, you try to optimize that list, right? You optimize that route. You try to do what you can in order to optimize the deck that you are building in the lanes that you are good at. And that is the part that I feel like a lot of Commander players kind of get stuck with because they're like, well, I just want to play this signature card that represents my deck because it has so much personality with it because they're cards that I chose and whatnot. And it's just like the process of you building that and choosing that and refining that was part of the fun. And Cube is just another process of that. It is just an extension of that. It is an extension of how you represent your playstyle.
I agree 100%. And I want to not speak for anybody else, but certainly speak to myself. And again, being a little tongue-in-cheek, that I kind of have adopting this, not talking down to Commander players, right? I want to make that very, very, very clear because I still enjoy playing Commander. But I feel like the language and the tone that I've used has definitely been more geared towards folks who only play Commander, who really don't have any interest in expanding formats that they're playing, right? So there's plenty of people out there that are going to be incentivized and emotionally attached to and enjoy playing Commander and 60-card constructed and Cube and the whole 9 yards. And this is definitely a spectrum of Magic players that exist out there, right? But obviously we're treating this as you're showing up to an LGS and you've got people sitting around playing Commander, which is likely to be the majority of players that are just kind of hanging out playing Magic. You might have folks there that are like, oh my gosh, you've got a Cube? Absolutely, I would love to play Cube. And they're more than willing to come and hang out and play your Cube. And all the way to the other side of that spectrum, which is, no, absolutely not. I only want to play my Commander decks. I have no interest in playing something I have no emotional attachment to or no knowledge about, and maybe not, have any enjoyment doing, right? So that is very important, I think, for us to make sure that we're keeping on that keel of, there is a somewhat tongue-in-cheek, I'll just say tongue-in-cheek sort of commentary when it comes to that. But I really do want to expand upon the draft process that, May, you just brought up, because I really do feel that that's such a critical selling point of Cube in general, right? Because I will say, when I was playing Commander exclusively, I loved the process of finding a commander or an archetype or a strategy that I wanted to develop and building that deck to completion was just such an enjoyable experience for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like building on that draft process as just an experience that you get to have every time you sit down and play a cube. I feel like the potential there is off the charts. Would you guys agree?
100%. Yeah. It's the uniqueness.
And the reason why I mentioned it the way that I did is because a lot of the disconnect that Cube players have when trying to sell other Magic players on Cube is trying to frame it in a way that is digestible. It's a matter of framing it so that way people are actually more willing to consider it as a format that actually expands on what they currently already like about Magic.
Yeah, I think ultimately, like, it's when you approach a group that in an LGS that's playing a game of Commander, it can be a little disjointing, a little unsettling for you to approach them. You have to have the sales pitch. You have to be able to present the idea in a very 30 seconds or less TLDR type of idea, right? You have to bring it to the players to make them kind of want to seek you out. You're lucky if you get someone that comes up to you and goes, yes, I've heard of Cube. I understand kind of what you're trying to present here. But on often occasions that I deal with my local LGS is predominantly Commander. It's a little bit of like, do you want to test your skills? Do you want to push the limits on what you know about deck building? I realize that you're very strong at deck building. You've all curated these wonderful Commander lists, 100%, and you've got it on lock. But what if I unsettled you a little bit and kind of, I don't know, put a trip line out in front of you and made you kind of build something on the fly, 20 minutes or less, how would you perform? And that can be unsettling. You're not going to get everybody to kind of stand up and follow you, but 3 out of 4, it is what it is. So it's a little bit of a presentation type of piece. And then, there's the accoutrements that come with that, like a nice box, having it well set, having all the pieces laid out, having your land sorted. All this stuff kind of matters to the presentation because the players aren't ruling to sit down, start shuffling your cube for you for the first time. These are all kind of things you have to consider. So you be ready kind of lock and loaded for the first time. But once they kind of get the spiel and they understand, then they kind of become part of, they become harmonious to the idea of the cube.
Do you think that's important?
I think the best way that we could potentially sell Cube is to entice people with their own love in the process of building those decks, the process of proving it, refining it, and working on that deck that they get from building new decks and building all these new Commander decks and whatnot. And that is essentially an experience that we can trap in a bottle and say, here it is in Cube form.
Do you think that's something that you want to sort of let them know right from the get-go, right? And sort of sell that again from that emotional point, like, hey, you guys are Commander players, right? So you guys have obviously built some good decks. You look like you know what you're doing. Not only do I want you to play my cube, but I'm also really looking for feedback. I want you guys to draft the best deck that you can in whatever your chosen archetype might be, right? You, Aristocrats player, I want you to draft the best Aristocrats deck. You control player, you combo player, whatever the case may be. Not only do I want you to try and draft the best deck that you can, but I really need your feedback. Like, that is important to me as a curator. I want you to tell me this card sucks. This card's too strong. This card is awesome, like so on and so forth. I feel like that's a great selling point. Again, I'll tell you, if someone came to me and said that, my ego's like, heck yeah, I'm willing to fix your cube for you because I'm the cube doctor. Not really. I'm just a guy that sits down and plays Magic. But I feel like that would be something that would be an easy sell for someone like myself. I'm selling myself as being so easily manipulated, and that is so correct. I'm a malleable
anything's possible
person.
with a couple drinks, Stu.
Yeah, exactly. You know me too well.
So you guys want to wrap it up here a little bit?
So I think the best way that we can tie these ideas all together on essentially how to move on from the fears of actually getting your cube established and reaching out to people without being the weird cube person that won't shut up about cube, right? Moving on from that and presenting it in a way that is actually enticing for players, that actually appeals to the things that they already enjoy with Magic. And that is a good step to bounce off of, because you can use that as a way to build your local community, which is kind of the overarching theme that we're trying to talk about here. Because as hard as it is to convince a bunch of people to sit down and say, but we could just play Commander, yeah, but we could also play Cube. And Cube lets you showcase sort of skill set and knowledge of the game that you already had. And building that confidence with them, I think, is important. Because there's a lot of people that are, frankly, intimidated with Cube, right? And presenting it as a way to reaffirm the things that they've already learned from these other formats is constructive.
I think you just hit the nail on the head with that word skill set, right? You're applying the same skill set that you do when building a commander deck. You're just doing it on a fly in a way that you don't get the luxury of just handpicking the cards necessarily that you want for that commander deck. Now you're having to be much more choosy, right? Do you choose that amazing, like, oh my gosh, I want that fetch land so badly, but there's that other card in this pack that I don't know if it's going to wheel, but it would be pretty good for my deck, but oh man, I really want the fixing. So there's all these little micro decisions that you have to make.
You took away the gold fishing.
Yeah, exactly. You're taking away that gold fishing aspect. And I will say that when I was heavily invested, I was sitting here on my desk and, playing my decks through a few times to see how, what do I need to mulligan into? What are the, what kind of hands do I want to keep? And, how do I construct the deck in a way that I feel like it's going to play the best? That kind of freedom is taken away from you. But I think that's where the magic of Cube really is every single decision from the first pack and the first pick that you make down to every single spell that you cast, the impact that every single one of those decisions make is so much more amplified because it's just the environment is so tight, right? It's very, very difficult to really quantify that, but it is a very, very difficult environment to play in, and that's what makes it so challenging and so fun.
Well, I hope this UberCube After Dark special we've done here, impromptu, right, has been fun. And then other than that, we're going to have Stu take us away to the socials.
Just kidding. We're going to have Anthony take you away to the socials. So I want to start out by thanking all of our Patreons for supporting the show. In addition to, if you're interested in anything that we've talked about during this show, please use our TCG affiliate link, which will be included in the show notes, to purchase any cards and to support TCG Player and the local stores that are connected to it. In addition to, if you want to join the Facebook MTG drafting page, I will include that in the show notes as well. Lastly, UberCube is a inked gaming affiliate, so if you're looking for your really cool playmats or dice bags, etc., you can get all your custom materials from Inked Gaming. That will also be included in the show notes. And then other than that, I'm just going to go ahead and go solo here, since this is a UberCube After Dark special, and say happy cubing.